our colleagues in Bangkok, and all of you can go through the session later on if you need. So welcome everyone. This is Daniel Criado speaking from Valencia. I'm joined by David Redondo. Hi, David.
Hello, Daniel.
Okay, you remember David delivered the first session on the goods receipt enrichment and equipment assignment. Yesterday, what we did, it's we went through the physical verification process, and as you can see, in today's session, what we'll do is we'll go through the main KPIs linked to the reports in BI that are going to extract information from the physical verification process. And as you can see in the screen right now, we are basically going to cover report number 1 and report number 3 on physical accountability of P&E, property and equipment that it's fixed asset are non-fixed assets. So as you will see in the session, basically the reports are broken down into fixed assets and non-fixed assets. So and even there are possibilities where we can merge and put all the pieces of equipment together. But initially, the reports are broken down into those two main categories, 1 and 3. Then we'll go to report number 5, which is the backlog in the reconciliation of not found yet P&E, not found yet fixed assets. And report number 9 will be the rate of reconciliation of discrepancies related to record accuracy. Basically, you'll see which are the main discrepancies found in the last verification process and in which status those discrepancies are, meaning that whether someone has taken action, whether it's been reviewed by the technical unit, approved by the technical unit, and the number of equipments under each of the categories of discrepancies for each of the entities. So if I want to, I'd like to welcome as well our colleagues in Valencia, the BI team, the RDM team, who is, these guys are the main responsibles of designing and delivering this product back in 2019. So it's not only these reports, but a set of 40 plus reports related to property management, from the equipment analysis to write-off, for accuracy of your stock, operational stock, strategic deployments of stock. So there are plenty of KPIs linked to all these reports. But in the session today, we will cover basically the physical verification BI reports, which are the ones linked to yesterday's session. So as I said, as we have been saying all these days, please feel free to drop your questions and comments. David will kindly go through them, and he will intervene and as he deems necessary. And as well as Kirill, Ivor, Zlatan, Casemiro, and all our colleagues in New York, as well as the Juan Reverte and the rest of the colleagues in Valencia, because the VI developers may want to intervene in case that there is a technical question that it's posed in the chat, or you want to know a little bit more on how this data it's created in the cubes and how these reports are being designed. So without further ado, I will share the presentation. Okay, let me. Okay, so yesterday's, if you recall well, we went through the physical verification process. As we saw, we generate the first list of physical verification using IH08. Then we conduct the physical verification, that's offsite in system, and we load the results of that physical verification into Umoja. Remember that in the template, there are two tabs. The first one with the list of equipment, and the second one with the same list of equipment, but with an extended information of the last discrepancies found in all those records. Okay, so we have in a nutshell, we have an overview of all the equipment plus the result of the last physical verification result, and then we'll have to key in the results of the current physical verification. With all that information, our colleagues in the units and the authorization groups will resolve these discrepancies that were found out in the templates. And after those discrepancies are resolved, or not, because we may have plenty of equipment not found, or in a situation that we have no like an accuracy of information in terms of function location, who is the person assigned. And as we said yesterday, this is a good exercise, the PV process, in order to go further and besides resolve these discrepancies, enrich your equipment master record, because in the future down the road, we will have less problems in the next cycle of physical verification, or in case that we want to reassign, or we want to transfer the equipment, or in case that we want to write it off and then dispose it eventually. So we're here in the part of BI reports and analysis, and this is the session of today's the content that today we will deliver. So initially, we will start with a basic introduction on BI. We saw in the exchange of emails over these past weeks that most of you did not have the role in BI that it's necessary in order to work with all these reports. We'll see later on which is that role and what reports gives you access to. But basically, in BI in general, if you are not acquainted with the solution, with this reporting solution, basically it's going to drag all the transactional information into one single platform, and from there you'll see several reports. Those reports are linked to data cubes from the same, let's say, business process, and from there you will be able to identify trends, and you will be able to mix up a little bit the different categories of elements and master data elements. So you'll see whether you will be capable to make an analysis a little bit more complex than the ones that you can do in transactional reporting in the typical T codes, like for example IH08 or some other reports that gives you kind of like a static information. Nevertheless, transactional report is important because it gives you ECC reporting or SRM reporting, gives you the possibility of having the information up to date, up until the last document created, up until the last transaction created in the system. On the contrary, BI reporting will get information from yesterday's, let's say. It has 24-hour delay, so there is a data dump going from one day to another in the server. So the information that you see in these reports and the pie charts that you can create will have at least 24-hour delay. Okay, so that's what I want to explain in this slide. There is work that is done behind the scenes from 2 a.m. to 8 a.m. Brindisi Valencia time, where it takes 6 hours to process all that data coming from ECC and SRM is dumped into BI. So let's say all the reports that you can see one day belongs to data or reflects, data from the previous day before 2 a.m. Okay, as long as you know that information, it's okay, because some people who are not familiar with the solution sometimes think that, well, like, what is that PO, or what that equipment that we just received in the goods received, and I have the serial number, I don't see it in the list of equipment. Well, it may happen that it was just created in the system, and then you have to wait 24 hours to be that equipment master record to be reflected in the report. Okay, it's only that. But on the contrary, BI gives you the chance to mix up a little the different categories of elements, and so you don't need updated information up until this minute, right? You can live without having the last 24 hours data, but you are more interested in seeing the trends or look for a specific gap in terms of information that you don't need to have this minute information or these minute records for doing that. So as you can see, once the document is created and posted in Umoja transactional system, ECC or SRM, it will be available in Umoja reporting BI with a certain delay as a result of the above ETL scheduling. So basically, it's extraction, transformation, and loading of data. That process takes a bit of time, and that's what we mean with the delay. So if you have any question, because I see that there are a lot of people who are not familiar with BI, so we may, that's why, in case that you are already familiar, forgive me for this, but it's important that we have at least the same amount of information from the beginning, and we don't get anyone lost. So as I was mentioning these last minutes, basically we have two transactional reporting in ECC and SRM. When we mean, what we mean with transactional reporting, basically it's a T code that will extract information, document numbers, equipment numbers, serial numbers, postings in FI, you name it. It's a list of records, right? Basically, you'll see in a table. You can work out a little bit with the layout, as we saw yesterday. And if we have time today, we'll show you a little bit on how the layout works. But basically, besides the layout, how to sort, move, do a little bit of filtering, you cannot do much more. And then BI, it's a platform within Umoja that it's devoted only for reporting. So it gives you more features and possibilities to work with the data. So in terms of BI user access and roles, it's important to bear in mind that there are basically, you see that these three components, but basically at the end of the day, we're talking about two components, which is the formatted reports and ad hoc reporting, because the third one, which will be the dashboards that you can create in BI. But currently, and honestly, the dashboards that are created in BI are being somehow substituted by the Power BI Microsoft tool in a way. So basically, the two main landscape of BI now are the formatted reports on your left part, which are static reports, tables with information, okay, and data that you cannot message, that you cannot change, that you cannot sort. You can filter, you can export to Excel and then work with the data, but basically you cannot modify the initial design of the table or the report. On the contrary, the ad hoc reporting or the analysis workspaces here, it has another format, another layout, and there you have plenty of spaces to drag and drop different items into columns and the rows, and then the report will change as you are performing the drag and drop actions into the left panel. Okay, so this is not the time where we will show you how to create reports and navigate into BI. This is the time where at least we do an initial introduction of the tool, but then we will jump directly into the property in the physical verification BI reports. Okay, if you think you need further training on BI, just drop us a message and we'll see whether we can share with you different tutorials and videos that we have created over the years. So how many roles we have in BI? Basically, we have a regular BI user. We'll give you access to the web intelligence reports. Remember, these static reports. The BI analytical user will give you access to the previous reports, to this web intelligence, but then will give you access to the analysis workspaces, to this ad hoc reporting. Okay, and then the Power BI user, it's let's say a super user that will have access to all reports, and then on top of that, he or she will be able to share reports in the shared analysis area, which is a small folder within the tool where he or she can track the reports that has created, and then other users in the system will be able to see and extract from the system. But basically, at the end of the day, we don't need to be power users. As long as we are analytical users for the folder of property management, we're good to go. Okay. So, and then in terms specifically for this property management BI reporting, you have to request the BI 55, that's the code, BI 55 analytical user. Right? That's the code that will give you access to all the reports in production. If you have the BI 54, for example, instead of analytical user, you will be a regular user. So you will have only access to the Web Intelligence reports. This BI 55 will give you access to all reports in property management. And for doing so, I'm going to just show to you live the system. So you see what I mean with this. So I'm going to log into the system right now. And as I log in, you'll see that there is on the left panel, there is a, let's say, a tree of folders. Each folder will point at one specific, let's say, business process as a whole, like finance, grants management, logistics execution, and if you go down all the way up until treasury or travel management. So here are stored all the production reports in BI. If we click on property management, and don't be confused because there is 3 folders underneath, you have the service order and property management. That folder is not the one, that we want. We want to use the property management one. So that's where you can see on the right panel where all the reports for property management have been stored. You see at the bottom, it's 46 reports. Each of these reports has a number. That number is closely linked to a KPI set up by in the property management manual. So let me zoom in case that you cannot see well. Thank you, David. I think that's much better. So you'll see it starts with different analysis workspaces. This is the place where you can basically work a little bit and do the analysis, not linked to any KPI. But then from the report number 1 here, effectiveness of physical accountability of P&E, fixed assets. And if I scroll all the way down up until report number 28 on incident accident, there, depending on the situation in terms of property management, you will be opening one or the other. Okay. Remember that today we will go through the report number 1, report number 1 and 3. This is an analysis workspace. So depending on what we select in the prompt, we will be targeting KPI 1 or KPI 3. We'll see how it works. Then we'll go to report number 3 solely, which is the effectiveness of physical accountability for equipment below threshold, meaning regular equipment, not being fixed assets. Okay. Then we jump into report number 5, reconciliation of not found fixed assets. This is an interesting one, right? Because as at to date, the system will tell you how many pieces of equipment and which is the capitalization. Its representation in terms of capitalization as in terms of not found assets in your own entity or mission. So that's having, if you find 1, 2, or assets that represents a big amount of money, that will be a really bad KPI. So just as an introduction, the KPI for this report, number 5, it will be 0 or 0.5 in terms of value of assets not found in your mission. So then there is an analysis workspace linked to the report number 5, and then we'll jump into the report number 9, which is the reconciliation of discrepancies. Again, this is an analysis workspace where it will tell you the situation of the different categories of discrepancies by cost center, by authorization group, by type of mission, and the number of equipments that are belonging to the different categories of discrepancies. So I'm going to stop here and check with David whether we have any comments or questions or what's the feeling so far. Over to you, David.
Hi, Daniel, thank you. There is actually, I mean, the overview I think was quite good, and there is actually a question, but I think it's a bit advanced. It's about if it's possible to schedule BI reports and send them, for example, via FTP. So I mentioned that it's possible. I was just replying on the chat, but maybe you want to add something.
Yeah, thank you, David. Yes, it's a bit more advanced questions, but probably the person who asked knows already the answer, meaning that he or she probably knows that you can schedule these reports, only web intelligence reports, and you can schedule reports, meaning that you can tell BI, okay, give me that report, send to me that report from a particular date, and you can send that report to my own inbox, my Outlook, or you can send through an FTP, or you can send a report to my BI inbox, because there is a BI inbox. I'll show you right now. You see that I'm in production again. If I go to home, currently when you just land into Moya BI, you go to documents. It lands directly into documents. But if I click on home, I have there some sort of dashboard with my recently viewed documents, which are reports. And you see 9 unread messages in my inbox. Those are different reports sent by users or colleagues that are dumped into this some sort of inbox, and from there I can retrieve and see those reports. Okay, so if you can tell the system to schedule a report, and then it will be landing over here on the right upper corner, there you'll see the reports landing on your inbox, let's say. But honestly, I don't use it too much, just from time to time, because I usually schedule reports to be sent to my own inbox. And I did a test today, this morning, to receive 2 or 3 reports in my inbox around 2:05 to 10. So we'll check later on, and then if you're interested, we can tell you how to schedule reports, and we can share a job aid that we created a year ago on how to schedule reports. It's a good question because it's really practical. It's you scheduling these reports, and then you don't even have to log in into BI. Just you log in once in order to set up the recurrence, identifying the reports, who is going to receive the reports in which format, Excel or PDF, and then you finish that scheduling, and then you just wait for the report to land in your inbox. So it's quite interesting, that one. So let me go back to the role BI 55. Thank you, David, for that. If you need a particular role in BI, or you need to know a little bit more on the BI roles, the user access provisioning, here there is a link in the presentation where you will see you will be landing a SEEK, and from there you'll understand a little bit more what you need to know in order to request a role in BI. But basically, there is a form that actually you can do it now in the portal in ESS, and then you request a role, a specific role in Umoja or in BI, and then a functional approver will have to endorse that requirement. If that, depending on the role, you will need a secondary approver in New York. From there, if everything is approved, Service Desk will grant you the role in 48 hours. So, and it's important because in BI, you basically are not going to create any transaction. So honestly, I will never, I will prefer not to break down in different categories of roles, but have a full access to everyone, because at the end of the day, it's just for analysis purposes rather than creating documentation or modifying existing documentation or document numbers. So it's just a view only, read only tool, but with a lot of capabilities for analysis. So I mean, there is no need to prevent anyone to say no to a BI 55 role in property management. So these are screenshots or the different folders in production. So it's property management, the folder that we're going to tag. And from there, you'll see the different reports related to physical verification, related to write-off and disposal that we'll see tomorrow with David after his session. We'll tell you a couple of KPIs on write-off and disposal as well. But you'll see initially we have the main analysis workspaces related to equipment in transit, inventory, and write-off and disposal. Those are cubes of data that have a lot of information for you to drag and drop and analyze. Okay, not linked to any KPI whatsoever. It's just for analysis purposes. Then we have a set of reports linked to physical accountability, which is a physical verification and counting and controlling in your warehouse. Then some KPIs linked to write-off, equipment inventory, fixed assets, and then disposal as well. Okay, and then we have the last two are related to incident accident reporting in your mission or your entity. Okay, and then these ones, report number 10, are more linked to virtual goods receipt process and equipment utilization time frame. But as you can see, depending on the situation, in your entity, you'll have full scope of visibility of BI reporting. But obviously, if you don't have an inventory and then you don't have a warehouse, there are reports that will not be applicable for your entity. So before we land into the first report, I want to just drag your attention to the concept of reporting entity, because you'll see this concept in every single prompt, in every single, let's say, initial launching of the report, which is a reporting entity, and a business area alone. Right? So a business area basically and reporting entity will be the main fields that you will use in order to launch reporting for property management. Okay, reporting entity, its objective is to identify the ownership and responsibility of the different items, whether we are talking about fixed assets, of equipment, from a property management point of view, from the business, let's say. But on the contrary, the business area will define more the financial responsibility of that particular equipment. And business area, in this case, is mandatory for in most of the prompts, whereas reporting entity is an optional field. Okay, so and I will tell you as a homework, we one of the last slides I am giving you homework in case that you have access, so you can test your data in your entity from the BI perspective. That I'll tell you later on. But basically, you're going to play a little bit on the reporting and the business area in the prompt, and you'll see what the data is going to retrieve from for your own personal, let's say, entity. So when we run any of the reports in the initial prompt, we're going to select your own reporting entity. In this case, can be ECA, Economic Commission for Africa, and then usually, as a good practice, you put all business areas, because you can have equipment that is, in a way, linked to a particular business area from the finance point of view, but from a property management point of view, it's belonging to your own entity. So as long as you put as a reporting entity your own entity, only one, and then all business areas, you will have full scope of all the different pieces of equipment and assets under your own reporting entity. For this particular example, as you can see in the screen, I put reporting entity ECA, and then I put all the business areas in Umoja, okay? And then the report itself gives me several pieces of equipment under business area ECA, which is the same that reporting entity. Makes sense, because most of the equipment will be linked one-to-one business area and reporting entity. But then, and probably in your entity it doesn't happen, but in the former DFS, in the missions, peacekeeping operations, it happens a lot. A reporting entity may have equipments under other business areas, right? Like, for example, UNAMI or MINUSTA. Okay, so this is just I'm mentioning this part because the reporting entity, it's important to define your own UN entity, but then it's important to understand that the business area itself, it's a mandatory prompt in the a mandatory field in the prompt, and as a good practice, you should include all business areas, so you are making sure that all the scope of the equipments are taken into account. Yes, I think someone is speaking up. Okay. Hi, David. I don't know whether that was a question or someone just intervened, but if it is a question, if you can just speak up and first put it in the chat, but if you really want to speak up, say the word question before starting to speak so we can stop right away. By the way, is there any question, David, on the chat or any comment? Is it okay? Okay, so I move on. So you'll see how this works in production, so do not worry about the reporting entity and business area. Yes, do we have any question? Okay, so I will continue. I don't know, David's checking the chat. I will move on. Then I wait until David interrupts me. So this is what I mean with the prompt. The prompt is the initial window that will pop up when you open a report. This initial window, it's like the T code, where you have to insert a value for different fields. Okay. In this case, I have 4 fields: date to, business area, reporting entity, and equipment type. Okay, I have 4 fields. 3 of them, as you can see with the red arrow, are mandatory. So I have to, for sure, put a date to, a business area, an equipment type before I click in OK, because otherwise the report will not be launched. So what I said with the business area and reporting entity is just as a good practice initially when you start to work with these reports, please put your entity in the reporting entity field, and in the business area field, put all the business areas, and we'll do that together live, because that will give you, after you launch the report, that will give you a good visibility of the equipment that it's under, that it's belonging to another business area, and you may wonder why. So it's a good, let's say, way to do a bit of the data checking and the quality of data already dumped into the system. Okay, as I said, for the UN entities is not that crucial, but for the peacekeeping operations and some other entities, they have lots of equipments belonging to different business areas. Okay, so this is an example of prompt. I'm putting a reporting entity ECA. Okay, only one, and as a business area, you see I'm inputting all of them. Okay, I'm putting, this is just a screenshot, but I'm inputting, I think, more than 40 different business areas. So after that, before going to report number 1, I'm going to go to the system. I think it's much better. So that's my home, tap home, then documents, and in documents I go to property management, and I go to the right panel, and in the right panel I can see report number 1, effectiveness of physical accountability. You see that the type of report is a web intelligence report, is a certified report, which is in production, and it was created in January of 2018. Okay, so in order to see the prompt, I double click on that line, and then I'll see the prompt that I was mentioning before. Okay. So I want to underline the fact that sometimes in terms of performance, the report takes a bit of time to retrieve the data. Do not worry, because at the end of the day, as we are basically going to manage KPIs, we can wait 5-10 minutes. Not now, but when you're just working in your workplace, if you launch a report, you can leave waiting just for 5-6 minutes, and then you'll see the information right away. And from there, you can save the report and have it ready for the next physical verification cycle. Okay, so this is the prompt, what I was mentioning before. If you click on reporting entity, you will be able to identify one. If you don't see any, you click on refresh values. Okay, and then you can scroll down, identify your own reporting entity. You will have access to all reporting entities in the system. So there is no, let's say, security limitation in terms of not going through information from another entity that is not yours. You can have access to all type of information. So I can identify one particular commission. Let's say I'm scrolling down here. See, let's see. Usually, yes, it's sorted in alphabetical Wait, so you click on ECA in this case, and you click on the arrow, so it goes to the prompt. And then in terms of business area, by default comes S11, S100. But let me just remove from there, refresh all values, and select, because the first one are master data elements related to the funds. So if you scroll down a little bit, and then when you see these 4 digits, these are usually the business area. So I'm clicking here in C100 all the way down up until with Shift, I'm selecting all of them, and I'm dumping all of them into the right panel. So as you can see, reporting entity 1, business area many. So I'm not going to run the report right now, but I would like you to start doing this in order to map all the equipment and fixed assets in your own reporting entity. This should be a good practice for you once you start doing using these reports. So let me go back to the presentation. So the first report, it's it's the physical accountability of P&E. Basically, it's the results of the physical verification only for fixed assets. So you can see it's a web intelligence report, so we can expect a static report, a table with data. What we did is we created a slide for each of the reports with key action, business need, the measurements, and the KPIs, as you can see at the bottom of the slide. That gives you a little bit of an introduction of what you can expect. So as a key action for report number 1 is to ensure the accuracy of the IPSAS financial reports for asset portfolio management. But the business need is to ensure that all the asset reports at the end of the reporting period reflect the actual entity's holding. So obviously, we want to be accountable for our assets. So this report will tell us basically the situation in terms of the physical verification, after the physical verification process of all of our assets. Now, in terms of measurements, this report is going to measure the capitalized value of our asset in the entity physically verified during the reporting periods, right? So if the asset is being physically verified during the data range that we put in the prompt, we will have units and capitalized value of that fixed asset. It is expressed as a percentage of the total capitalized value of the assets under the control of the entity, and the unit of measure is percentage of capitalized value. Then the intention is to support the reporting of the quantity of the capitalized value of the fixed assets relevant to physical verification, distinguishing the moment in which the last physical verification took place, meaning that basically there are like 2 or 3 main fields in the prompt, which is the dates, because we're going to put a date range of dates where the physical verification may have taken place. Then you have to put your entity, and you have to put your business area as well. So those 3 items, you click in OK, and then you'll see the information in that data range of capitalized value of fixed assets. Okay, that's why the data range for your own particular entity, the ones who know more, it's yourself, because I can just, for example, use ECA, but I have no knowledge whatsoever about the physical verification process of ECA, and I don't know when it took place, so I might randomly take a data range that really doesn't make sense. So you, as the ones, as let's say the custodians of the process of the physical verification, you know much better than us, which is the data range that you should input in the prompts. Okay. KPI, the target of this key performance indicator, the target is set at 100% with a tolerance rate of 0.5. Well, makes sense, right? Makes sense that the 100% of, in terms of capitalized value of your fixed assets, are physically verified during the reporting period. So you don't want any fixed asset not being physically verified during the physical verification cycle. So you need to physically verify it, at least go through all your assets during the physical verification process. So then here, let me see. Here we have a screenshot of what we call the scope determination. And now that I see this screenshot, it's important to underline that for each of the reports in BI, you have a job aid. And that's a good news. For each of the reports, each of those 45, 40 plus, let me go to documents. For all these reports, all of them, for these 46 items, you have a job aid where the job aid tells you what's the purpose of this report, who can access, who can make changes in the report, what's the scope of data, the scope determination. That's very important because it will tell you which is the equipment in scope and the equipment out of the scope. So you understand from the beginning what to expect in terms of data coming from the report. In this particular case, for report number 1, in the scope, the equipment out of the scope is all the fixed assets with the under write-off process or has some sort of administrative error. All the equipment in transit are out of the scope of this all the fixed assets in transit are out of the scope of this report. And then the equipment acquired in period, if the equipment was acquired during the reporting period, will not be in the scope because probably it's not within the equipment cycle. Excuse me, it's not within, doesn't fall within the physical verification cycle. And then the equipment transferred in the period as well is not in the scope of this report. So you see there is a job aid, a link to the job aid. If I click in the job aid in this link, I will automatically, and you'll see the PDF document that is linked to this report. I hope you see in the screen. You see property management performance BA report, report number 1, effectiveness of physical accountability of PNE. There are table of contents, the enterprise roles accessing this report. As you can see, BI 55, analytical user. Even from the start, meaning where you can find or how you start in BI, it's there explained, different screenshots, information on what you can find in the prompt, how the prompt looks like. Prompt is the window that pops up once you double click on the report. When you insert, let's say, or you start filtering your data with tips, screenshots, or where you can find. So it's quite complete. And always, it even tells you how you can extract your report, convert to a PDF, convert to Excel in case that you want to do an analysis in Excel, right? The layout of the report, explanation of what is physical accountability, the measurements, and some other measures there. So it's quite complete. We really like, and our colleagues in RDM did an excellent job. So we really encourage you to go through these job aids as well as you go along with the reporting. As you can see at the end, usually of the job aids, you have the scope determination. This is key for you to understand the amount of records that you'll find in the report. So let me go back to the system and then just launch live report number 1. Okay, so let me close this one so you see how it works. And let me close this one as well. So it's report number 1. I double click. It takes a bit of time. It's not 6 minutes that is it takes to refresh data, but you'll see that initially I have an asterisk here, period 2, period from, business area, and minimum acquisition value. These are the 4 fields that are mandatory, required prompts, as you can see. The other, without an asterisk, are optional. You see, reporting entity is optional. So reporting entity, let me select one. And I can just select any of you. Don't take it personally, because this is just data that it can be fine, like UNOC, for example. And I'm going to select all business areas. All business areas, refresh values. From this one all the way to the bottom. I drag to the right panel. So it's reporting entity Geneva with all business areas. The period from, let's put, I'm not familiar with the physical verification cycle there, but probably, let me just put 2019 January and the end period 2019 December. So within 1 year, we're going to check all the physically verified fixed assets in UNOC. The minimum acquisition value is 0 and comes by default, and it's already filled in. And you can see already I can click in OK. And the system, well, it's going to take a while to retrieve the data, but I already, let's say, launched 2 or 3 reports, and I converted into PDF. So while the system retrieves the data, I will go directly to these reports, and I think it's one of these. You see, it's in PDF. So previously this morning, I extracted data from report number 1. So basically, what you can find there, once the report finishes, in this case, what I did is I put, you see here, you see the information that I put initially in the prompt. I put the period 2019 January, 2019 February, December. And then I put all business areas, you see all business areas, and then the reporting entity is ECLAC, Santiago de Chile, okay? So what we can find here for ECLAC in 2019, we can see that the system found 133 fixed assets. All of them, let's say, all of them have been, let's say, physically verified. So there is 100% accountability. And the capitalized value of all those fixed assets is a little bit over $2 million, right? All of them have been inspected within the period, okay? So the period, meaning that the period that I set up in the prompt, okay? 2019, the whole year. If I scroll to my right, the breakdown now of the results of the physical verification is that out of the 133 fixed assets, almost 85% of them, which is 117, have been inspected. And we don't know exactly whether we have a discrepancy or not, but we know that 16 of them, of the 133, which represents 15.4% of the all fixed assets in ECLAC, have been reported as not located. And it represents as a capitalized value, those 16 fixed assets, $333,000, more or less. Okay, so that's just, let's say, one screenshot of what you can find in terms of physical accountability of fixed assets in ECLAC. Okay, just one single shot. This is a web intelligence report, so basically we cannot do much. Okay, but once you convert into PDF. Let me go back to the system and see whether we have, you see, it takes time to retrieve the data. Okay, once we retrieve the data, I will tell you how you can convert into PDF. Okay. So this is basically what we can find here. Report number 1. I think that I even launched for another elements and other entities. Report number 1, this one. Let me see what I used. I selected a different period. I selected from September 2019 to 20 of February of 2020. And I did select business area S200, and I didn't put even reporting entity. Okay, so for this particular business area, I can see that most of the pieces of equipment, in this case fixed assets, have been accounted for, meaning that have been gone through a physical verification process. 15 were inspected out of the period, so not within the date of range that I put initially. Okay, so this is really important, right? Because I did it a bit of randomly, but if you know exactly which is the reporting period that it's linked to your, let's say, physical verification process, then you will retrieve accurate data and real data, right? So this time range that you set up in the prompt is really of utmost importance in order to retrieve data that makes sense, right? But in this case, we can see that 83% of them were inspected in the period. Only 5 fixed assets were reported as not located, and 15 were inspected out of the period. So 15 of them were inspected, but not within the date of range that I put initially. Okay, and we have information here on the capitalized value. If there is one piece of equipment identified as a potential loss, then it will be here placed in this table at the bottom. Okay. So that's another report from another entity and business area. So let me go back to it takes time, as you can see, okay? But at the end of the day, what you're gonna retrieve is the same set of data. One table with the percentage of the fixed assets going through the physical verification process and what is their capitalized value. And then a breakdown of the same items by the ones who's been inspected, the ones reported as not located, and the ones, if any, inspected out of the range that you put initially. And if you have any of those pieces of fixed assets identified as a potential loss, will be included over here. So that's the summary. Okay. Then once the data is retrieved, we'll go to the second tab, which is the physical accountability activity for the period. So it's a little bit more information, more specifics on the different business areas linked to the reporting entity. And then the third tab, will identify whether any fixed asset is in transit. So basically, we'll identify the equipment in transit which are out of the scope of this report. So let me go back to the presentation, and at the same time, let me check with David if we have comments or questions. Over to you, David.
So thank you, Daniel. So far, there are not additional questions. So the audience is quiet today. I think they are very interested in what you're doing, and it's quite clear. So no questions. Thank you.
Okay, we hope that no questions mean that everything is well explained, let's say. But if not, you can go through the video again, and then you can drop a question through the email as well. So thank you. Mute. Okay. So that's a screenshot on the prompt, screenshots on the different tabs. You remember physical accountability, the summary with the tables. Then you'll have here in the presentation the explanation of the different rows, what means inspected in the period, what means not located, what means inspected out of the period or never inspected. So you have their information we already explained. Then if we click on the second tab, which is the physical accountability activity for the period, here you'll see two tables, one main header with the value of the different fixed assets inspected in the period, the ones inspected out of the period, the ones never inspected, and so on and so forth. And then if you have a, let's say, breakdown of reporting entity and business area, because remember that I selected only one business area, then the system even tells me which is the reporting entity linked to the same business area and the breakdown of all the different pieces of equipment with the capitalized value and the same information in terms of physical verification. Okay? Then if there are equipment in transit or fixed assets in transit, then you'll have information here in the last tab. So let me see again whether I have here. Okay, so now the report is finished. This is just for your information, no data to retrieve in the equipment in transit, meaning that for the data that I inputted in the prompt, there is no equipment in transit, it's okay. Let me close the left panel. So this is a report live. Honestly, I don't recall well the prompt that I put, but I put initially all business areas and then Geneva as a reporting entity. So for Geneva, the period in 2018 from January to December, basically most of the fixed assets have been gone through physical verification process. 5 of them, the total is 745. 5 of them were never inspected. Their capitalized value is 360,000, but for the rest, which is 740, we have a capitalized value of $23 million. Then we have the same information in terms of accountability on the right panel. No one has been identified as a potential loss. Remember that we are in the first tab. Second tab, you'll see that there is only one-to-one relationship in UNOC. So that's a good that's a good piece of information. Why? Because remember, I put all business area and only one reporting entity, but the system is telling me in the second tab, the 745 fixed assets belonging to UNOC corresponds only to business area UNOC. So there are no fixed assets from as a reporting entity Geneva belonging from the financial point of view to any other business area. Okay, that's why it's good to put in the business area all different options, so you'll see if you have equipment or fixed assets falling under another business area, you can identify them. Okay, and no fixed assets in transit, so that's what you can get. So then if I want to, let's say, export this report into PDF, remember that I showed to you in before a report in PDF. So I'm going to show you in a minute how to export the same report into PDF. David, do you have any comment, question? Over to you.
Yes, indeed, Daniel. I'm not sure, but maybe it's a good idea if before showing the part of exporting to PDF, if you could run again the process of running the report, because there are some comments about, I mean, some people said that they missed some steps. So maybe we can repeat going a bit more slowly. Okay, so that I think will help to some of the audience that is the first time that they see that. Over to you again.
Okay, thank you, David. I mean, that's it's good feedback. And forgive me if I'm going too fast, but there are plenty of KPIs, and I've been delivering BI courses for 5 years already, and sometimes, I have my own pace. So remember, in documents, in the Documents tab, I have in the Property Management folder, plenty of reports. Okay. In our case, I selected report number 1, effectiveness of physical accountability. I double click on that line, and then the system is going to pop up this prompt, this what we call prompt, this window where we can input the initial master data elements based on our initial requirements. We can input our reporting entity, we can put a date range of dates, we can input different business areas, and so on and so forth. So usually doesn't take that much. So let me see. I can just refresh just in case. Okay, so gonna go again, property management. Report number 1, the web intelligence report. And if there is a problem, I have screenshots all over, so don't worry, in the presentation. So now it works. So if you see in the background, I'll see at least the layout of the report, how it's going to look like. So depending on what I put in the prompt, all these different cells will be with different numbers. Okay. So this is the prompt. You see, prompt initially, you see if there is an asterisk, sometimes it's a red arrow, but this case is an asterisk. That means that it's a required prompt. In this case, I have to put a date of range, a range of dates, important. This is the ones that comes by default, 2017 January, 2017 December. Okay, but you can change. How you can change? You click on the field and you go to the right panel. Okay, 2017 is not good for us. I'm going to put 2019, and you have to bear in mind that the format of the date is really important, because if I just put here 1 instead of 01, the system will not let me in. Okay, so let me just put here 01, 2019 01, and the period 2, which is the final part of the range, will be December 2019. So I'm putting 2019 12. So this is my range of dates. Then as a business area, it's defaulted as S100. I leave it, so I select and I click on this arrow. And then to see the content, I have to refresh. These will be business areas, codes, alphanumeric codes linked to business areas in Umoja, with a value and a description on the right side. We have here peacekeeping operations, special political missions, and UN entities. Okay, let me just take, for example, Economic Commission for Europe, or even SCAP, Bangkok. So I select the one, I put in the arrow. So you see it's R400, the business area, going into my report. Obviously, you can select more. I can select this one and put in the right, but it doesn't make sense really to do an analysis as a business area from 2 or 3. It's better, as I said, reporting entity, select all values. I'm going to put business area SCAP as well. You see a SCAP, select right panel. So I'm putting only one business area, which is a SCAP, one reporting entity, SCAP as well. What I said, good practice. Instead of only one business area, it's much better to put all business area, and then people from a SCAP will be able to map all those equipments in case that there is something wrong. Because maybe a SCAP should not have any piece of equipment or fixed asset under any other business area but themselves, which is R400. So let me just refresh all values and select all of them. As I said, this is some sort of error in the report. The first 10, 15 values are kind of like funds or budget period. So just go directly to the first one in the description, UNCC C100. Go all the way down and select using your keyboard all the values. Go to the right panel, you'll see all of them are now in our report. You see that the field here is filled in with all the business areas and only one reporting entity, the date range that we put initially, January, December 2019. Minimum acquisition value is 0, prompted or defaulted initially, so it's okay, but you can change. Yeah, if I click here, I can change here the number. And then if you want to save this prompt, you can click here on the floppy disk, which is called a variant, and I can put here test SCAP, for example. I'm creating this prompt variant. I click in OK. So you see it's over here. So every time if I click on the drop down, if I create different type of prompts, all of them will be coming here in this drop down. This is some sort of let's call it type of layout in BI where you can save your own prompt. So every time you select one, the prompt summary will be automatically filled in. Okay, so and then you click on OK, and then the report refreshes, retrieves data, and then you see what's going on with the fixed assets, in this case in Bangkok. Okay, so I hope it was clear. But as David mentioned before, in case there is something that is not clear, you can always go back to the video. Over to you, David.
Thank you, Daniel. I think it's much better now the second time that we see that. While the report is running, there is a question about the content of the report 01. So we see that there are 2 tables. And yeah, both tables regarding the KPI accountability, they are similar, right? Yeah, I think it was referring to that screen. So when you have the 2 tables in the report, could you please clarify what is the meaning of each of the tables?
So yes, as you can see in the initial slide for report number 1, the KPI is set at 100%. 100% meaning that with a tolerance rate of 0.5, but basically that's the number, the reference number is 100%, meaning that all the asset reports, as you can see in the business needs, all the assets at the end of the reporting period reflect the actual entity's holding. At the end of the day, basically, we want to physically verify all our fixed assets. That's why we have 100% within the reporting period. So we can put it the other way around. It's just we don't want fixed asset not being physically verified in our reporting period. So where we can see them. So let me go back, for example, to the PDF. And here in this report, you see that KPI on accountability, it's 83.5. So obviously there is no 100% accountability on all the fixed assets in this particular report. We still have 15 of them, 15 fixed assets, never inspected out of the period. And we have 277 never inspected. So if I was working in the property management unit in this particular mission or entity, I will take a look at these 277 pieces of equipment. I will go through for example, the asset balance report. We'll see the list of the asset master records, equipment master records, see what's going on and why these were never inspected, whether there's a problem with the function location, or this has to be enriched or being written off, stuff like that. So it's true that when you first launch the report, there is no particular, let's say, cell highlighted with this is the KPI that you should, excuse me, this is the number that you should link to the KPI. But for this particular report, this should be the cell that you want to take a look. I mean, you want to have 100% accountability of all your fixed assets. Then there are other tabs, as David mentioned. Let me see if you scroll down. Okay, and I think that Juan, our BI developer, is as well covering that question. But in the second tab, basically, we are not talking about KPIs, although we have here the header, the 83.45, but we have a breakdown of the business area and reporting entity and the different number of equipments. Okay. So let me move on. Thank you for your question. So and I'd like to let's see. Let me just this report was launched. In this case, you see we are having 100% accountability, and which one it is? The reporting entity was SCAP in Bangkok. Okay, for the date or range of dates that I put, all of them, all the fixed assets are accounted for. They went through the physical verification process, and there is none never inspected. There is none inspected out of the period. So these guys are on track, let's say. Over to you, David.
So thank you, Daniel. Just to add and also to comment what Juan, the expert from BI, was saying, no, related to the question. So the question was actually about the two tables. You see the table on the left and the table on the right on this report. So you explained already the table on the left, and Juan was confirming that the table on the right is basically a breakdown of accountability and is breaking down the inspected items between reported as non-located and inspected out of the period. So it's a breakdown in between the inspected in the period and reported as not located. Okay. So basically, just to leave that also in the audio. Over to you then.
Thank you, David. So good thing. I mean, don't think that we are spending too much time in report number one, because at the end of the day, this is the methodology for all the different reports, meaning that you have once you understand how the prompt works, you basically are going to launch the report, each of these reports. You're going to select the dates that you, as a let's say as a staff member who works in property management, knows much better than us the range of dates that you have to input the entity that you have to input, and then you're going to run the report, and then you're going to understand much better than us the data that's going to pop up in each of these reports. But it's important for you, as David mentioned, to go slowly in how they work, the prompt works, how the master data elements are filled in, how to launch a report, and then the rest of the reports are working pretty much the same. So let me show to you real quick how you can export this report into PDF. You see in the menu, in the upper menu, there is an arrow here with, let's say, a disk, and it says export. If I click on the button, I will see here different options, but basically you will have to select here even PDF that comes by default or Excel. You can export to text or CSV archive, but basically the first two are the ones who are working well. Either you export to PDF or Excel. Let's select Excel, for example, and see what comes. Because actually the exporting into Excel is quite good from a web intelligence report. You'll see that the Excel is downloaded. If I click in the file, you'll see that what you can see in BI, it looks very much the same in Excel. So it takes just a minute. Okay, let me see whether I have another pop out in another. Okay, so here we go. You see this is Excel. Besides the UL logo on the left side, the rest is pretty much the same. You have a header, the tables with the same numbers, and then you see we have Excel sheets corresponding to each of the tabs in BI. We have 3 tabs. I'm getting back to Excel. We have here 3 tabs, the same. To bear in mind, and very important, you see this capitalized value, it's $7 million. You see this number of equipment, 323. But you here see, and let me just put a bit bigger so you'll see much better. I would assume that this is a formula, right? Because this is a total or a subtotal at the end. Please, and I'm highlighting this in red. Please bear in mind that whatever you export to Excel will not export any formula whatsoever. So this 323, you'll see it's a number. It's not a total of these 3 lines. This $7.9 million is not a subtotal. It's not a total of these 3 lines, if any. You see, if I put here, or if I put here, for example, I'm just putting 65, the total doesn't add up. 323 plus 25. You will have to create a formula yourself in order to reflect the total numbers. Okay, so please pay attention. Everything that you export to Excel in BI will not export formulas, will not export percentages, will not export macros, will not export anything but numbers. Okay, that's a good point, because sometimes you get, once you export to Excel, looks pretty good, and then you start working with other Excels, and then somehow the numbers do not add up, and it's because of that, okay? So that's exporting to Excel. The same will be applicable for PDF. If you click there in the arrow, select PDF, clicking OK, and then you'll see a very nice report now with the UN logo here, you see. And each of the page will correspond to one tab. The first tab, the second tab, and the third tab on the equipment in transit. I'm scrolling down and up. So that's for report number 1. And I know that it's 3:17 and we may want to take 5 minutes break. And then we'll try to show the rest of the reports. We will spend 1 hour and 15 minutes in one report, but I think it was worth it to invest time in how to use and what's the look and feel of these reports, in case that you are not familiar with the tool. So it's 3:17 Valencia time. In 5 minutes, we shall resume with the report number 3. Thank you. Hello, everyone. So it's 3:24, so we still have 35 minutes to go through the BI reporting for physical verification. As you can see in the screen, I'm still in report number 1, but I'm moving to the report number 3. Okay, report number 3, it's the effectiveness of physical accountability of equipment below capitalization threshold. Well, seems like a complex title, but at the end of the day, it's the same type of report, but for equipment not being fixed assets. There is obviously a threshold where a piece of equipment may be tagged as a fixed asset or not a fixed asset. So this report number 3 will categorize all the pieces of equipment and the physical verification results only for equipment not being fixed assets. So obviously the same, it's the target for this KPI is 100%, meaning that we want to have all of our pieces of equipment physically verified for the time being and for the physical verification cycle. In terms of measurements, it's going to measure all the pieces of equipment with a serialization profile UN01, which is basically all the pieces of equipment with a serial number. It says which arrived in the entity before the starting of the reporting cycle and have been physically verified during the reporting cycle. It's expressed as the percentage of non-capitalized equipment physically verified, and the unit of measure is percentage. You'll see that how it looks in the next slide. But basically, the intention of this report is to support in terms of quantity of value of the equipment not linked to fixed assets. So what we can expect in this report is basically information. Looks pretty much like the other one, with the percentage of pieces of equipment which went through the PV process in terms of number of equipment and then acquisition value, right? And then on the right side, you have a breakdown with a bit more specifics on the results of the physical verification process. Okay? In this case, for example, I just selected 2017, the whole year, for a particular business UN entity. And then what I can find here is that I have 6,001 pieces of equipment in this particular entity. And only 2,000 plus have been inspected in the period that I included initially, which is 2009-17, which represents 35% of the total number of equipments in my entity, whereas the majority of the pieces of equipment, 857, which represents almost 65% of them, have not been inspected in the period that I'm identifying here. So almost 400,000 pieces of equipment were never physically verified in 2017. Okay, that's what we can understand. And then we have the same breakdown, but in terms of acquisition value. Then the right panel will break the same numbers, but down into the inspected in the period, reported as not located, and inspected out of the period. So this is important because at the end of the day, these 2,141 are broken down into 2 lines: 3 pieces of equipment plus 2,138. So the pieces of equipment inspected, only 3 out of those 2,141, only 3 were reported as not located, representing $7,000. The rest were, let's say, accounted for, but we have plenty of them that were not inspected in the period that I set up. Okay, again, at the end of the day, it's yourself, your unit, the ones who know much better which are the range of dates that you have to use in these reports. Okay, so again, if there is a piece of equipment identified as a potential loss, it will be represented over here. And there's a job aid, a link with the job aid as well, report number 3. we have here two tabs, the summary that you just saw, and then the second tab, which is the header with a breakdown of business area and reporting entity. In this case, all pieces of equipment are belonging to Unifill and business area Unifill. So there is no more business areas for this reporting entity in that particular period of time. Okay, so then let me go to the system and show you where this report is. This report number 3. You'll see that we saw before report number 1, then we have to go 5 lines below, and then we'll go to report number 3, effectiveness of physical accountability of equipment. I double click. You see the same dynamic all over, and usually it makes sense that report number 1 and number 3 have the same layout, because at the end of the day, it's pieces of equipment or pieces of fixed assets, and each one of those category of elements are separated. Report number 1 for fixed assets, report number 3 for the rest of the equipment. And you see that the prompt pretty much looks the same. Obviously here, it will not be applicable the variant that I saved before, because this is another report, right? This is report number 3. So I'm going to put a period here, 2019, for example, January, and 2019, December. Business area, again, you have to remove S100, refresh value. Let me put someone else on the spot. Sorry for that. So let me put, for example, Vienna. It's a reporting entity as well. I'm going to put Vienna. Well, let me show you something. Sometimes instead of scrolling down and scrolling up, you can look for a specific concept here, and I'm putting asterisk, a wildcard, and I'm putting Vienna. Like this, then an asterisk, and then before clicking on the binoculars, I'm going to click on this black arrow, match cage on searching key. Okay, key basically is the alphanumeric code. Here I'm putting just text, so I'm going to just select double end. So let me just put Vienna here and click on the binoculars, no value. So let me select match case now. Yes, so I'm going to put UNOF instead of Vienna. Here we go. I click on match case. Thank you, David. The system understands that it's UNOF, and I move to the other one. In this case, I'm going to put only one business area and one reporting entity, so maybe the report is going to run much faster. I'll click in OK. In the meantime, because I did already created a couple of reports, so let me go back to report number 3 in PDF and see. We can analyze these numbers. Basically, I did the same report for this case. The date range is September 2019 up until now. For let me, thank you. Let me put it with which one business area was S200, and I didn't put any reporting entity. So for this particular business area, I have only 52% accountability. The rest, 40% of the equipment were never inspected in the period. And in this case, I have almost 30,000 records. So it's a lot of equipment, and this is the acquisition value. Information related to the same, but information on the equipment not located, in this case, 115. Okay. If I scroll down in the PDF, then I see in the second tab the breakdown of this case, Geneva plus the reporting entity. So these are reporting entities linking to the same business area, which is Geneva, and the breakdown of the equipment and the same information as above. So Let me go back to the system and see. Still, it's going to retrieve the data. So I'm going to go back to the main screen, and let's see the job 8. I can have the job 8. In the meantime, I can show to you where you can find the job 8s. So let me see. I'm going to go to Umoja job 8s. Okay, so job 8 Umoja. There in the part of property management, so you have to scroll down a little bit, even more. You see there are plenty of work down here. You see property management performance via reports. All these are job aids linked to all the reports that you saw in production. So this is a good, if you could, David, whenever you have a chance, if you can just copy and paste this URL in the chat, that would be great. So report, this case was number 3, effectiveness of physical accountability in PDF. And the same thing you can expect. You can expect a bit of an overview on what the report determines, the objective, who can access, how you can access BI. I'm scrolling down. How to read the prompt, which are the mandatory fields, which one are optionals, how the report looks like. You see, layout, information on how to export. Sorry for this playing around with the scroll here. And an overview at the end on the scope determination, which data. It's here we are. Here, I think it's scope determination here will determine the records that are going to be, let's say, addressed by these reports, and the equipment out of the scope. In this case, the equipment out of the scope, it's the ones related in transit, whether they are going through a write-off process or they have some sort of administrative error. So all those pieces of equipment will be out of the scope of these reports. Let me go back. Let me go to the system again and see. It's taking some time, as you can see. Well, it makes sense because now for equipment rather than fixed assets, we are going to at least see thousands and thousands of records. So it makes sense that it takes a little bit more time than for the fixed assets. Then let me go back because I think I launched another report number 3. So we show you what you can expect. In this case, what did I put here? All business area for, in this case, SCAP for Bangkok. You see, these guys are doing a good job, at least in the date in 2019. Remember that they had 100% KPI for fixed assets. They have 99.71% for inspected in the period. So basically only, let's say, 5 pieces of equipment were not inspected, and 3 of them were reported as not located. So actually those are, let's say, I think good numbers for SCAP, as you can see. Let me go back to the system. Now we have here, you'll see these are definitely not good numbers for S400. But I'm just selecting this date range for all, let's say, for this particular business area, all the pieces of equipment, all of them were never inspected. So maybe we want to take a look at this this number because we really want to be this 100 in the first row rather than in the third one. Okay. So let me go back to the presentation here and see. You see in report number 3, the KPI is set up 100%, but we have a little bit of more tolerance, 2%. In fixed assets, we only have 0.5. if you recall well. Okay. So let me see now. We're going to launch the report number 1/3 because I really am interested in show to you at least the other type of reports in BI. So far, we have seen web intelligence reports, this type of reports, the ones that are static, that gives you the information you consume, you export to Excel, you export to PDF. But on the contrary, there are other reports, the analysis workspaces or ad hoc analysis, which are not, let's say, devoted to give you a KPI, but are more in the view of giving you a scope of analysis where you can just drag and drop different items and see what's your trend. You can create pie charts. You can identify gaps in terms of data and some elements that may have an interest for you. So this is report number 1/3, and you'll see why it has these two numbers. So let me go back to the system, documents. So it's report number 1/3. You see that instead of a web intelligence type of a report, is an analysis workspace. Okay, so let's see how it looks like. The same dynamic, I double click, and I'll see a prompt. Well, this is the first time I see this error. Return to the server, so probably I will have to log in. Okay, so it's property management. All right. Okay, so that's a good one. I want to ask Juan Reverte and his team. I think some of them, they are in this session, why this is happening, because it's the first time it's happening. But let me go back to the presentation because I have screenshots of this report. So let me just put a bigger display settings. Okay, so this is report number 1/3. Sorry, 1/3. Here, all the analysis workspaces, they don't have KPI, so you don't have a slide where you see the KPI. There is a business need. There is a let's say a unit of measure, a KPI, because these ones are intended to give you a bit of the scope and analysis of your equipment and fixed assets. For report number 1/3, the prompt is a little bit more, let's say, rich in a way that you have more fields required and optional. But the difference between whether you are going to see fixed assets or whether you're going to see the rest of the equipment or you're going to see both, it's at this level, the equipment type. So equipment type, depending what you select in the match code, you click in the match code, you'll see asset, both, or other. Asset means, if you click on asset, means that the report will only reflect fixed assets. If you click on other, means that the report will only reflect equipment not being fixed assets. And if you click on both, then the system will sum up those two categories of elements. So basically, the pivot, all this report is pivoting to this field, equipment type. So if you select asset, basically you're going to see report number 1, right? The web intelligence report. If you click on other, you're going to see report number 3. If you click on both, you're going to see a mix of the two reports. Okay. So report KPI number 1, that's in the blue is report number 3, KPI number 3. So what you can expect to see, you can monitor your KPIs, but from an analysis workspace perspective. What means? That means that the system will give you now granularity on the data. Remember that in the web intelligence reports, what we saw before is just a table with numbers, but there is no specifics on the equipment numbers and granularity in terms of data. But if I go to the analysis workspace, then I have equipment master records, asset master records, and specific of each of the records that are within the KPI. So that's important because that's why the analysis workspace gives you an entry point to do an analysis based on equipment master records and or document numbers. But the web intelligence reports is just a report for you to consume the KPI, nothing else. So that's why I really want to, and if David, you can drop a question to these guys in BI because the system was not letting me in for some reason.
Hi, Daniel. Actually, Juan replied, and he sent a link in the chat. Actually, he said that it's the report is working the number 1 and 3 using that URL. So maybe you want to use it. There is a message in the chat from Juan.
So let me launch again the report. Here we go. Thank you, Juan. So now it works. So that's the prompt. As I said before, it's a little bit more complete because if you click in all, you'll see all the different fields that you can use, right? But if you click on required, you will see only the ones mandatory for you to fill in. So in this case, I'm going to you put a period from 2019. Let's select always the same, January 2019. December, business area. Then we select SCAP because these guys were doing very well. So let me just find SCAP here and look for the text. SCAP. Okay. Minimum acquisition value is 0 and equipment type. Instead of both, what I'm going to put, because I remember that for SCAP, 4 items were not found for some reason. Let me just select other. So I'm going to target only equipment, not being fixed assets. Okay. So basically, this is an extension of report number 3. I click in OK. And let's see how long it takes to process. In the meantime, I think that I can go to the job 8. So let me go to the job 8 in Umoja, and you'll see that even for the analysis workspaces, we do have job 8. So it's report number 1.3 analysis workspace, this one. And here you can expect a little bit more information because our BI developers, they went through the whole, let's say, set of data, and they even deliver a description of every single characteristic that you can find in this report. Always the same, with the prompt explains to you how the prompt works, which are the fields, how you can launch the prompt, how the report is going to look like initially. Okay, but the good thing about these analysis workspaces is that you have plenty of attributes on the left panel that you can insert in these 2 boxes, and the report will be changing. And that's the beauty of that analysis, that you can create, let's say, your own report based on your own analysis. Let me go down so you'll have a view of how in the layout of the report, you have explanation of what each panel consists, and this is what I was looking for, characteristics. Then you have here a description of each of the characteristics that you can use in the report, with even information. If you're, for example, you're going to use notification, because there is a category used for notification, and there is a category code in the notification related to description, whether it's a surplus, obsolescence, damage, accident, faulty, hostile action, natural disaster. This is for the notification category code. What means equipment potential loss describes you that category. The different discrepancy types that you can find in the PV. So it's really complete. in case that some of the attributes are not familiar to you, you can really go through the job aid and see whether, again, let's see if still the report is here we go. So good timing. So this is the analysis workspace, okay? So in case that you are not familiar with how this report works, don't be overwhelmed with the amount of information, because really, as long as you go through the job aid and then you go through the videos and tutorials that we have created for how to navigate these reports, you will really familiarize yourself really fast. So what I said before, it's just initially comes with the business area, which was Bangkok, and all the reporting entities targeting Bangkok as a business area. Okay, so let me just take reporting entity out. So you see that we have here 2 items. These are the 2 first items. So if you just drag out reporting entity and you put it back to the left panel, then I might expect 1 column less, which is here. So I can read the report much easier. And in the same time, while this works, because it takes time, you'll see these are screenshots, for example, for a business area and different reporting entities. You have different measures. For example, you have here for business area S200, you have 1 reporting entity, which is CEB, with 46 pieces of equipment with this acquisition value. Okay, if you go right, how to read these 45 these are the number of pieces of equipment inspected outside of the period, and only one of them, and one of them was never inspected. For this part, for the second reporting entity, it will be the same number of pieces of equipment, the ones inspected in the period, outside of the period, or never inspected. We can see, for example, here that for DMSPC, we have 183 pieces of equipment. Only 2 were inspected in the period. 102 are inspected outside of the period that we put initially in the prompt, and 79 were never inspected. So initially, if you want to take a look at 1 column, is this one, which and how many number of pieces of equipment were never inspected in the period that I inputted in the prompt. That's an initial piece of information that will be interesting for you. And the good thing is just if you select, for example, this one, let's say these 2 pieces of equipment in MINUSCA, right? You will be able to identify with dragging and dropping the equipment number, which serial numbers, with 2 serial numbers are linked to these 2 pieces of equipment, and you will be able to go and analyze the equipment master record, who is accountable for, which is the functional location, and from there you can, let's say, drill down a little bit these 2 as a number. Okay, so let me go back to the system and see. So what I have here, I have in I think it was Bangkok, almost 4,000 pieces of equipment with $5 million as a acquisition value. You see all of them are 100% accountability, and the rest are 0, except this 28 number of pieces of equipment not located. So if I was working in Bangkok in the property management unit, I would wonder why these 28 pieces of equipment were never inspected. And I can use this left panel if I scroll down, and I can identify the equipment master record number and drag it in here, and I will see the specifics of these 28. So you see, the good thing is just it's sorted in alphabetical order. So I will have to go to the equipment number, equipment C. You see, there are plenty of things that you can use in this report, plenty of characteristics. Equipment number should be here, equipment number. So if I drag equipment number into the rows, I will have a breakdown of all the pieces of equipment within this equipment business area. Okay, thing is like it takes a little bit of time because we're talking about thousands of equipments, but once you are, you know, on your workplace and you have time and you can just do it with your colleagues, you can really analyze, you know, and take your time to understand what's going on in your own entity. But these analysis workspace are a good space for you to do an analysis rather than consuming the KPIs. Okay. So let me go back to the presentation. David, over to you in case that we have questions. Thank you.
Hi, Daniel. Just before you continue with the presentation, a quick one that is, as you know, very recurrent. So Gopalan was asking how to get the prompt after you run the report. You know, once you run the report and you enter the prompt information, you want to change something there or you want to verify, but how to do it in there. I guess he's referring to this analysis workspace, but maybe we can also say in case of Webby. So thank you, Daniel, if you can clarify that.
Yeah, thank you, David. Yeah, it's a good one. Well, you see that now, and I will get back to your question, but you see the specifics. All the equipments are over here. You see, I drag and drop equipment number, and I have here equipment master record numbers and serial numbers of all the equipments in Bangkok. All of them. So the ones with that set number of pieces of equipment not located or never not located here. If I see a 1 linked to this equipment master record, then I will be able to identify much easier. So let me select the column, sort in descending order. So the numbers will appear on the top panel. See, you'll see. So every time I see a 1, meaning that these equipments from 10013 6 to 8 up until this one. These are the 28 pieces of equipment with the equipment master records that were never located in the last physical verification process in Bangkok. So I will, if I was working in Bangkok, I would definitely, you know, I will right click here and I would definitely block these numbers and understand why this is happening, right? So I will keep those members, these things that you can use in analysis workspaces, but we don't have time to show you how to navigate. But if you are interested, we can show you and we can tell you which are the tutorials you have to follow. So as you can see, it's a different way to, let's say, address the reports. These analysis workspaces is just an entry point for you to the analysis, whereas the web intelligence are more devoted to consume the KPIs. So while this is working, I'm going to answer the question to our colleague. Well, imagine that as our colleague is saying, we want to change the prompt for whatever reason, you know, we want to change, let's say, the equipment business area. You'll see here the prompt, change prompt values. If I click here in this button, I will be able to change the prompt and then launch again the report. So I can go and delete this business area and select another one. I can select, for example, UMIR with the same period, or I can change the period, or I can change instead of equipment type other, I can select both fixed assets and equipments. And then I will have to click on OK. Then if we are talking about, let's say, web intelligence report, let me try to find one web intelligence report. Let me see. It will be a matter of clicking on the refresh button. You see this one? Okay. Imagine that, let's say I launch this report and imagine that we have here some numbers, right, related to, for example, Bangkok. And I want to change, and instead of Bangkok, I want to use Geneva. If I want to change the prompt, I will have to click here on refresh. If I click on refresh, I will be seeing again as a pop-out the prompt, and I will be able to change here things. So you can always go back to the refresh button in the Web Intelligence report, or to this button on the left panel here called prompts, in case that you want to change the prompt in the analysis workspace. So let me go back to the presentation because I'm afraid that we already exhausted the 2 hours. But at least I want to make clear which is the first 3 reports as a recap. Remember that report number 1, it was a web intelligence report, will give us information of the fixed assets, or the physical verification KPIs related to fixed assets. If all of our fixed assets have been physically verified during the reporting period. 2, report number 3 will give us the same information, but for non-fixed assets, for pieces of equipment. But then if we add those 2 sets of informations, we come up with the analysis workspace 1/3 will give us an analysis and specifics of all the equipment in our entity, being fixed assets or non-fixed assets. Okay, that's as a recap. Then, and then I will not go into the system, but I really want to show you report number 5 because it's really, really important. Report number 5 will give us information of the pieces of the fixed assets not found yet. Backlog in the reconciliation of not found fixed assets. You see that the target for this KPI is 0. So we don't want fixed assets with the not found yet discrepancy in after our physical verification process. So that's the, let's say, initial explanation of the KPI. We will not go now because we will not have time, but it's there for you to read. But this is basically what you can find. You find a combination of business area and reporting entity with the quantity not found and the capitalized value not found, right? It's really, really important because the more assets you find here, the worse for you, really. That means that there are, valuable equipment in your own entity not being accounted for, and that's not good news. The same, you have a analysis workspace only for report number 5, where you can identify an asset or another piece of equipment, the same combination, and then you will be able to do an analysis from that perspective. And last but not least, the report number 9, which is the rate of reconciliation of discrepancies. It's an analysis workspace, so that you don't expect a table with a KPI. But this is what you can find. You can find different reporting entities with the type of discrepancies after the physical verification process was done, and then the number of pieces of equipment under different situations, meaning whether there is no discrepancy, whether there are pieces of equipment pending technical section review, already reconciled, and already reviewed by the technical section. So the discrepancies here are categorized in the different status of the solution given to the physical verification. So for example, here, let me read this one. For OJRCS, we found 137 pieces of equipment with no discrepancy found. 5 of them were not found, okay? Then whenever it's reconciled by the technical section, then these 5 will be over here. So this gives you a bit of a perspective of whether the technical sections, whether the SD11, the property custodian of those pieces of equipment, have taken action or not after the physical verification process. So I'm sorry because I'm going fast, and I think that with this session recorded, plus the job aids, plus the documentation that we will be shared with you, at least you have a good starting point in order to work with these reports. But I want to give you a little bit of homework. You can see in the screen here at least like 5 points. Launch report number 1, see your fixed assets. Launch report number 3, see what's the status of your equipment after physical verification. Launch report number 1.3, this analysis workspace with the specifics of the equipment numbers. Launch report number 5, and analyze your fixed assets not being accounted for. And launch report number 9, and analyze tab by tab the rate of reconciliation of these discrepancies. Okay, and 2 tips. First, launch all your reports with your entity and all business areas, so we can verify the mapping of all your equipment in your entity, whether it's correct or not, because you might find pieces of equipment that should belong to your own business area rather than someone else's business area. And the tip number 2 is launch all prompts using the dates related to the last physical verification process carried out in your entity. Because as you can see in the different demos that I'm doing over here, I'm identifying a set of dates in this range in the prompt that may not be really matching the business process itself for that particular entity of physical verification, right? So, because if I just match the last physical verification cycle in the prompt, the results that I'm going to obtain are much realistic, right, in a way. So now this is the end of the session, and I'm going to go back to David and see whether we have questions or comments before we finish.
So thank you, Daniel. And there are no additional questions actually. So last one was about the prompt. So nothing else from this side. Thank you.
Okay, David, thank you. So I thank you for your interest and the time that you spent with me today. It was I think it's this session has a dual purpose. First, to be an entry point for you to start using BI in general. Most of you may fall under that category, let's say, let me put it that way. And the other objective will be for the ones of you who are already acquainted with the BI tool, then you will be able to identify which are the reports that you can start using right away in order to analyze your physical verification process. So if you are in category number 1, don't be frustrated. This is just a learning process. So if you need further training, you let us know, and we will give you documentation and videos and tutorials. And then you will be able to start using these reports. If you are in category number 2, already familiar, and you are going to start launching these reports, please let us know how it looks, how the data looks like, and whether the data is accurate and it's matching your own, let's say, transactional reporting. So without further ado, I'm going to close the session, and I will send to you the video link to this session right after, along with the rest of the documentation. Thank you very much for your time, and remember that tomorrow is the last session that will be led by David, linked to write-off process and disposal. Quite important, this process. And then if we have time, we will show you 2 reports, 2 BI reports linked to, one for write-off and the other for disposal methods. So thank you very much for your time. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye.
Thank you. See you tomorrow.